Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Wilson.
And I'm Chris Ehmke.
And this is Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we got an awesome show lined up today.
Yeah, I got to tell you, looking at the show notes, right, just a recap of everything we've done this year, I was surprised. I'm impressed with what we've accomplished in 2022.
So we often come around this time of year, end of the year, beginning of the new year, we like to go back and look at what did we do throughout the year. So we're going to do a 2022 review today. We're going to go through each month and kind of talk about an episode from each month about maybe not necessarily the best episode or most popular, although some of them are, but just some of our favorites, some of the ones that were really memorable to us as we've done this. Chris, we're in like year 6, year 7 of the show.
Something like that. It's all a blur. It's been so much fun.
I think 2015 October is like when we started. Yep. So we've been doing it a long time. And we always like to go back and just kind of, I think, humble ourselves a little bit and think about all the really, really cool people that we've had a chance to talk to. People that, like, not your average diesel enthusiast actually gets to have a conversation with.
It's not just that it's not just that experience, but what's that grow and what's that gain us as an opportunity in the future from knowledge, resources, just having the opportunity to potentially co-op with some of these guys in the future.
Yeah.
I remember January of 22, beginning of the year, we did a podcast and we were talking about lazy tuners making smoky diesels, and this is something that for years we've talked about in our company, right? Like internally about how to properly tune a truck and what the norm in the industry was for different strategy for tuning a truck and what type of strategy was learned or adopted from other platforms leading up to the new stuff. And I'll say in 22, a lot more and public knowledge, I think, has really grown.
Yeah.
Not from our podcast, but just in general, the industry, the knowledge, a lot of growth has happened in just kind of looking at, January 1 or, January, the first month we talked about that. And over the course of the last year, it's been that much more of a focal point with end users.
Absolutely. Consumer demand has changed, and that's because people are more educated and they have a better understanding. There's also more challenges. So as you're looking at tuning a newer vehicle, if you tune it to be really smoky, you're going to cause problems with the emissions equipment, or you're going to draw unnecessary attention, and people are starting to understand smoke is wasted fuel, it's excessive heat. People understand the system better, whereas back in the day, if you're looking at like 2010 and you're tuning trucks, well, it was simple. You deleted it and you threw more fuel at it, and who cares if it smoked? That just meant it was a diesel and it was going to make more power. But now people have a better education. People have a better understanding of kind of all of these what used to be complex ideas are kind of now considered to be like novice level stuff. We don't get the same amount of requests for smoke tunes that we did 5 years ago.
No, and I think it's also cool, in the upcoming months of highlights that we're going to go over, there are other companies that have started to invest resources into, maybe the additives that are used or the potential injector upgrades that are being utilized in the newer trucks and even in the older stuff, the mechanical injection stuff even. So, it's really cool, and it's, you mentioned it earlier, humbling, to kind of see, we've been talking about a lot of stuff like this for years on the podcast and over at, Calibrated Power. So to kind of see that shape up in the masses, of the industry is really cool to see.
Absolutely. One of the times that I think we had one of those interviews where I sat back and I was like, oh, this guy's really good at this, which happens often. To be honest with you, we interview a lot of people, and most of the people that we interview, I generally step back and think, oh, that was a lot of fun. But when we interviewed A-Rod and Cody about Power Strokes, now they run a YouTube channel and social media around Power Strokes and Fords in general, there was so much information that I didn't know, so much knowledge that I wasn't aware of, and to have the insight of a large dealership mechanic, somebody who sees a lot of vehicles for a lot of different reasons, that was one that was really cool, where I've kind of come around to the oval more over the years have gone on, but I certainly still, there's a warehouse of shit that I'll never know.
I think there's something to be said when you have two different, call them like media outlets in a sense. We're a media outlet, right, with what we do, and same with A-Rod and Cody. But two quality content creators coming together and teaching each other about stuff, or in this case, us just kind of sitting back and interviewing and listening, it is insightful.
Yeah.
I think we definitely look at ourselves as fairly knowledgeable in the space as it is our careers. So it's nice to get a different take and a different outlook from another set of eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
March jumped into when we were diving into biodiesel.
I learned so much in the month of March when it came to bio. Coming from, Paul, leading up to that, you and I had sat down. Diesel prices were starting to go through the roof price-wise, and a lot of guys on the forums were talking about, well, just run bio, just run bio. I was very naive to it. I believe you were as equal.
Oh, yeah.
So bio isn't bio, I learned. There's different grades of bio. There's different ways of the process of bio. There are different engines that are more susceptible to running bio versus other engines.
I thought what was really interesting was the technical stuff. I think a lot of guys gravitate to and understand that. And I agree that stuff was interesting.
Yeah.
What really grabbed my imagination was the economy of bio.
Yeah.
The idea that it's really cheap is the concept. And like when you see pumps that say 10% bio or 20% bio, you just assume that's a cost saving measure.
Right.
And it turns out probably not.
Well, I think too, so many people are like, oh, bio's bad. Like after the bio interviews that we did, like biodiesel has a lot of attributes that could potentially benefit you from what is at the pump, or if it's done correctly, if you are going to create your own bio.
I think of it like if you drink really expensive scotch
Yeah.
and then you show up at a sled pull and somebody hands you a mason jar of something clear and you're like, oh, that's really gross. It's like, well, you don't have a taste for this.
Right.
Like, yeah, sure, we're playing the same game of alcohol, but like this isn't the same world for you. And that's kind of like what diesel fuel at the pump and making your own biodiesel looks like. Also understanding that there's like industrial grade biodiesel machinery that you can pretty much, like if you own a large operation that already has a bunch of fryer grease, I think is probably the easiest feedstock to compare this to. That's likely the only way to make biodiesel at scale and have it make sense.
Yeah, no,
right?
Definitely. I think one of the things kind of piggybacking off of what we did in March was in April, where we had Hotshot Secrets on and we were talking about fuel additives and why they matter. And I think that was a really good episode because a lot of that, I think, piggybacked off of what we had interviewed the year prior with Randy Harkema over at Exergy. I think that interview with Randy last year was probably one of the first interviews when it came to fuel additive where you and I kind of opened our eyes a little bit more and we're a little bit more open-minded too.
I wasn't in on that interview. I was out that day.
Oh, damn. Well, I did it. It was great. The Hotshot Secrets one you're referring to.
Randy, I was
so
there for.
The Randy you were here for.
Yeah.
And like I said, that was the first time like we kind of opened our eyes to that. So having Hotshot Secrets on and having them go more in depth about, the company's history with fuel, additives and fluids in general for, diesel pickups, modern day trucks, and then backing into some of their strategy for the additives. It was, really insightful. I don't think additive as much of a voodoo or as a snake oil-esque style product as I did 5 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah. When Hotshot Secrets hit the scene, I first thought, what a stupid name. And then I learned more about him. I was like, all right, well, maybe it's actually kind of a good name.
Genius.
I was like, well, that kind of speaks to exactly who they are and who they're working with. And then going back, and I did listen to your guys' episode, and I was like, Kyle Fisher was one of those guys that you heard talk about it and you could feel the conviction in it. And then the data and the science around it of understanding it, I think that was really, really cool for me. That was definitely an eye-opener. Randy, when we talked to Randy's one of those smart guys that you hear him talk and you're like, well, you're a lot smarter than me. That's really
I'm not going to question you.
So I'm definitely not going to give you much kickback, right? Is you're just like, well, if you say it, I assume it's true.
Yeah.
So those were two very, very different interviews that I think both got across a very broad stroke kind of idea, which is like, while there might be something to this diesel additive, maybe it isn't, like you said, just voodoo or snake oil. So that brought us up into May. May is usually when we're full on focusing on UCC prep. So we're usually interviewing UCC competitors. I picked this one as my favorite for May. And that's the episode's called 3,000 Horse horsepower carb certified injectors.
Talk
with
about
Lenny Reed.
clickbait. Talk about clickbait.
If you haven't listened to that episode, I strongly urge you to go listen to it for two reasons. One, I don't want to give away the secret based on the title, but no, there's no 3,000 horsepower carb certified injectors. That's not a thing.
But there are carb certified injectors,
which is huge,
and there are 3,000 horsepower capable injectors,
right,
which Lenny is very knowledgeable on both fronts.
And
okay,
and hilarious. That's the thing, is we talk to a lot of smart people in the show, and we talk to a lot of people that have passion. I love talking to those type of guys. Lenny is somebody who is very smart. He has a lot of passion, and he also has a magnetic personality.
Yeah, no, I think Lenny's been in the game, and Lenny was the month of May was kind of what I was alluding to when we were talking, the January, the clean diesel and this and that. Lenny's been in the game a long time. I remember 10, 12 years ago on, First Gen Forum and Cummins Forum with the older mechanical stuff, DDP sold injectors. Right? So to see him in the game as long as he has, but perfecting and going back and revisiting those older platforms, he has a drive and a determination to, hey, I want these older mechanical trucks to run clean. The same reasons why a lot of guys got out of the mechanical to go common rail. He wants to give that example of, hey, you could go back to that stuff and we could provide you an injector that is going to run clean and burn accordingly. And it's created opportunities. I mean, now we're working with him on a couple of behind the scenes projects here at the shop. Yeah. So, that's one of those opportunities where you got him on the pod, you interview him, great content, smart guy. And, there was opportunity for more data and more collaboration in the future to take place.
Absolutely. June, that's beginning of June is when we do UCC. So we went to UCC. We talked to everybody. A lot of the interviews that came out the month of June, we had actually already done before UCC, and it's just kind of a timing and publishing thing. So we got to talk to first place winner, which, most people, you forget that most diesel performance enthusiasts, guys who watch the pages and follow all the YouTube channels, they never get to talk to the guy who wins UCC. Right. So we got to talk to Justin Ziegler. That was awesome. Yep. But I know one of my favorite interviews, absolutely, throughout that time and throughout all of last year was talking to Turbo Tom, who has sadly passed away at the track. I thought it was important to bring up that episode, I thought, gave a really good insight of somebody who just had passion.
Well, let's talk about that episode, the behind-the-scenes stuff. We recorded that episode after hours at our personal houses.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock at night.
8 o'clock at night, because that's what worked for him with his work schedule. Yeah. And Paul, let's just be honest with the listeners. When we have to record, in those odd times, we've already worked, we've already dealt with our kids, our wives, this and that. 8 o'clock podcast recordings are not really our favorite,
you just
to say
hope
the least.
You get somebody talkative so you don't have to hold the conversation.
And Turbo Tom did exactly that. He blew us away with his energy, with his drive, with his passion, the determination, and his excitement, for the diesel industry, and him being that DIY pinnacle of, hey, if I can do it, you can do it, and here's the blueprint. I mean, he was very, very, very transparent on YouTube with the things that he was doing leading up to UCC. So, rest in peace to Tom. I mean, he was a phenomenal individual. I'm really appreciative that we had the opportunity to have him on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing the prep call with him on his lunch break. Just getting off the phone and smiling and being like, "Oh, it was a killer. This is going to be a good conversation." Absolutely. If you haven't heard it again, pause, go listen to it. It's that one to me probably was the highlight of the year. Just based on really talking to him, right? Just really understanding that. Okay, so that was June. July brought us into. I'd say one of the trucks that maybe was the most surprising outcome for me.
Oh, the truck from California you're talking about.
Yeah. I can't stop, or can't stop.
Can't stop. Can't stop was the plates. So the background on the truck, right? It was a 17 to 19 L5P Duramax, lifted to the moon, big wheels, 40-inch tires, stealth turbocharger, tuning, just the works. And it was a Cali truck, right? So it had all the glim and glamour to back it up. Powder coated, everything to the hilt. I mean,
did it have the custom center caps? Do I remember that?
I'm pretty sure that the wheel and tire combo on that cost more than my daily driver.
Check.
It was a beautiful truck, a work of art to say the least.
It was a truck I usually would make fun of.
Right, but
I'll be honest.
Let's talk about the experience of driving, because so we did a ride along in that truck.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm not a fan of lifted trucks. I'll just be very vocal. Yep. Neither are you.
Yep.
That truck drove so nice.
It was so surprised. That's why I say, like, talk about don't judge a book by its cover. The reason I don't like lifted trucks is my driving experience with them. 99% of the big lift, 12-inch and larger trucks that I've driven, or even just any trucks with 40-inch tires that I've driven, they suck to drive. The
suspension is sloppy. The steering is sloppy. The braking
trash.
Is horrible.
Yes.
Just it ruins what that truck is fully capable of.
And all just so it could look cool, because I never see these trucks doing anything cool except driving. So they're mall crawlers. So I just...
Crawl.
I have this like...
Mall crawling looking for lot lizards?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
100%. So I don't like these trucks. Now listen, I love, and I've said this many times, I love people doing wildly irrational things with their vehicles, such as lifting them 18 inches and putting 40-inch tires on it to drive 30 miles an hour four times a week. But I love the idea of it, but I would never do it.
No.
That is a truck. Listen, I wouldn't put my money into those mods, but that is a truck that I got in it and I expected one thing, and then we drove it and it was totally different than what I expected.
Coming from, there's guys that, put their trucks on a reverse level and a street tire, and they like that look. Or, guys that...
Are you talking about a Carolina squat?
No, I wouldn't. But that's another... here, I like mine to be leveled, a street tire, and that's it. And then you have the Carolina squat. Then you have these lifted trucks. And then you have, like... the front level with a 35, right? Like, there are different tastes of trucks. You go to any truck show and you're going to find everything and anything in between.
I want them dropped as low as they can go.
I like that.
I like that look. It usually also drives like shit.
I've never been one to, really resonate with that lifted truck, but I can say that Can't Stop truck, that truck that we drove in July, was a truck that... It was practical. Like, it was a big truck. It was hard to get in and out of. Like, I'm shorter. You're Grace. You're a little taller than me, but nonetheless, it was still hard to get in and out of.
Yeah,
like it's a big truck.
Yeah.
But the practicality of the truck, it still drove nice. It was comfortable driving down the road at 70, 80 miles an hour.
It turned fine.
It did.
That's something that those
it
trucks
stopped
never
well.
do.
Like, everything about that truck, the functionality was there. So I could say that's probably one of the first big lifted trucks that I was like, all right, like, this was done right.
I think the last time I was as surprised by a driving experience is when we had the ragtop Humvee.
Okay.
And I was like, this is going to be so cool.
Yeah.
And then we drove it together, because I had driven that truck a bunch, two different occasions. And I always drove it by myself and was like, oh, this is fun. I like this. This is stupid. And I love that it's stupid. And then we drove it for a podcast together. And I just remember us yelling at the top of our lungs. Yeah, and still all you could hear was engine noise over it. It was a brutal episode for our listeners. But I was surprised that it went bad, because I was so excited about the Humvee, and this, I expected it to be bad, and it went so well that it blew me away. Yeah. August, we had a couple of good episodes in August. I think we did a rebroadcast in August, but I know I sat down with Nick at one point. We did a big block check-in. The big block Cummins down in the shop, that's our old UCC build. It is to this day one of the coolest builds I've ever seen. It's all-time one of my favorite trucks to talk about.
It's a one-off, unique, never been replicated in anything that's current in the diesel world.
Yes.
So
it's the peak of impractical.
It is the peak of it. I mean, yes.
Because it doesn't even fit into being a competitive in anything that you could have competitors with.
All that truck is I've been here going on 9 years, and for 8 of those 9 years, Nick has talked about wanting to do a big block build. Even when I had my 5.9, my 07 truck in the motor, he's like, oh, let's just do this A3, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, like that, no. So he did it, with his own resources, which is super cool. And anytime we have customers from anywhere in the country come into our facility, they want a shop tour, right? They want that experience.
Yeah.
And we have a row of trucks, shop trucks projects that we've done over the years. And that is one of those trucks where first glance, it's a Cummins motor, right? And then they see the turbochargers hanging off the passenger side, off the manifold. And it starts to really spark some questions because there are 3 massive S500 91 millimeter turbos. And all you see is 2.
Yeah.
Right? Then there's a third one tucked in the back. Then the questions start getting asked. And it's like, well, it's a retrofit, it's a semi-engine, blah, blah, blah. It's 10 liter, blah, blah, blah. And that is usually the one after the conversation gets started, out of all the cool stuff that sits at the shop between customer builds and shop projects, that's one I think a lot of people gravitate to because it is so unique in its own right.
Yeah. So. It's also the only shop truck that I haven't got to drive. Have you got to drive that one?
No.
I think we
got
to talk to somebody about this. I think the podcast, just as for integrity's sake.
Yeah, for sure.
Just for integrity's sake, not for our personal benefit.
No. We want the viewers and listeners to experience.
It's for you that we are going to now harass our boss about driving that vehicle. Okay. September, we sat down and talked with Mike Hanzuk from Alaska about the very first sentencing on felony charges for deleting trucks. So
that was a scary, I didn't feel comfortable in that moment talking about it because it opens your eyes and this isn't just him, that this is happening to. There's a lot of shops across the U.S., a lot of businesses across the U.S. that this is starting to affect.
Yeah.
And, I think Mike went into things in a very factual manner, right? He was very hey, here's the timeline. This is what I dealt with. Here's the business that we generated. This is how we were running the business. This is the marketing efforts. This is where we were doing it. And here's my demise. This is what happened.
Yeah.
So
he got house arrest for 6 months for deleting for being a part owner in a company that deleted trucks. Yep. We got in 2013. We never thought it would go that far. We always thought companies would get fined to death and just put out of business based on fines, which is what was happening around that 13 era. That's like when H&S got popped for the first time and all that stuff was going down. So we really at the time the big scare was, oh no, your business will just get fined, and if your owner doesn't have the cash, your company could fold based on this. Now come to find out in 2022, they're not only pursuing felony charges. It's not just a scare tactic. They can convict.
Yep.
They can convict based on conspiracy charges. There's all sorts of wild lifelong implications for people around that. We've heard some other guys talk about it that are big names in the industry and kind of what they're facing. We're going to see how things shake out here in the future. Yep. But I thought that interview, as far as its impact on diesel performance, I thought the information in that interview was hard to explain the value of it, of being able to understand it and get your head around it.
Regardless of your position on emissions in the EPA, regardless if you're one-sided or the other, right? You believe in it or you don't. You can't deny that these things are happening.
Yeah.
And all we want to do is shed a little bit of light as to, hey, here's what's going on, right? Cut the forum BS, which you read on Facebook and what people are posting. Forget the BS about what people are sharing. Here is a real experience firsthand with someone, and this is the outcome.
Yep. Man, that one shakes.
Some chills, to say the least.
October. What did we do in October, Chris?
I love these types of podcasts, when we talk about timelines of vehicles, right? So on this one in October, we talked about the 01 to 07 Duramaxes, so the different RPOs, and what upgrades took place throughout those years, from RPO to RPO, and the differences and the changes along the way, and some of the failures along with it.
Yeah. I do love a research episode. Do you know our most popular episode ever is History of Duramax?
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that just crazy to think of?
That's you don't get any more educational than that.
No. And which, I'll be honest with you, the amount of time I put into actually reading about the history of Duramax was kind of mind-numbing. It's not my favorite way to spend time at work, I'll be honest. It's just not. I think I was working from home then, so I think doing the research off hours was a little bit lighter. It was a little bit easier at that time. But this was one that I think we went back on, and I had to go and I had to do some refreshers because I don't know the last time I looked at the difference between LLY and LBZ injectors.
Right.
They're different, and that's about all I ever need to know.
Of course.
Right? So going back and learning about some of that stuff. And then also it's an episode where we didn't have a guest on, which we usually do, but lately we've been trying to do more of this educational style where you and I can come on and just kind of talk and just share some of the knowledge that we've gained over the years, which is crazy to think. Yeah. Based on where I was at 7 years ago and my knowledge of diesel and where we're at today.
Speaking of knowledge and data collection and stuff like that, November I thought was a big milestone for not only us but the company, and that was with a ride-along with an L5D truck. It was big, it was lifted, big obnoxious truck.
Worst vehicle I've ever driven on the road.
Coming from someone who had a Kodiak, right? Like
yes.
This is the new version of what you had.
Yeah. My Kodiak, maybe because it had a spring-loaded seat,
maybe
my
helped.
Kodiak was more comfortable to drive. Also, I was like 8 years younger.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that might play into it a little.
But I think it was cool as far as what that platform has to offer, because we get a lot of complaints with guys with those vehicles from the factory, just the sheer lack of power, vehicle speed limiters, all this. So it was crazy to see, in some of the testing that we were doing, what tuning in a turbocharger has the capabilities to improve on.
Drivability, night and day difference.
Yeah,
They're
and when
two
you're
different
talking
vehicles.
when you're talking about the crap,
worst vehicle
the
I ever
suspension,
drove was based on the suspension.
and I bet
it
that
was
thing
such a stiff ride.
Yeah,
it felt. There was times in the recording that I'm pretty sure we had to clip out
because it was uncomfortable.
Because it was as we went down the road.
The one thing we didn't do that I wish we did, and maybe we'll have the opportunity in the future, would be to put a trailer behind it and see how the vehicle drives. Because I have a hunch that thing drives nice.
Oh yeah, well that's how it's designed.
I know.
To be loaded, and we drove it unloaded. And we drove it on some of the worst streets in the country. No, we listen. This should not be a knock towards the guy who built that truck or that truck itself. No. The suspension and the way we drove it, and the tires that were on it, and just everything together
was not the recipe.
It was not the recipe. No. It also was not the purpose of that
right.
truck, even though it did have that badass truck bed that I swapped it
to. It did. I mean, the swap. I mean, it was to us kind of mid conversion, right?
It made me miss Monroe beds.
But the power delivery and the drivability enhancement there, that was a super cool truck to have in house. We learned a lot from it, and it's been kind of a popular demand with guys now. Like, hey, I want that tuning and turbo package. Now.
Yeah.
We saw it, we felt that. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that was November. God, this month. I love that I included a highlight for this month. We're in this month. This is my favorite episode because no, I'm just joking.
It was my favorite because you weren't in it.
I know.
There you go.
It's honestly, I didn't want to give Chris credit this close to Christmas because I don't like him going home for the holidays feeling good about himself. But Chris and Nick went out for a ride along, heavy towing with a diesel 101. It was a good fucking episode.
No, I mean that was an episode. Justin and I, you had left us. We had nothing, and Justin's like, "What are we gonna do?" And I'm like, "Man, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" There's so much data and testing that we've been doing with the Cummins platform and turbocharger configuration, and it just so happened that we had a truck in the shop with a trailer that we were doing some data collection with, and I'm like, "Yo, I'm gonna talk to Nick. This is the move. This is what we're doing." And it was a super good episode. Anytime we can get Nick on board and we can have data being recorded and Nick is forced to answer my questions, great time. Great time. But
Nick is forced to answer my questions as though you don't get your questions answered normally.
But it was one of those things where I think it was more of an insightful episode, right? We get a lot of guys that call in at the shop. They talk about drive pressure, talk about boost pressure, talk about EGTs. They talk about all these things.
Talk about numbers that they don't know about, right? And they want to.
Not only do they not know about them, but they don't know the severity of when those numbers become an issue.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that episode was really good, and that's something that, for me, myself, and what I do, I can work and lean towards that video in the future for people that are wanting to learn.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. It was a really good
episode. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that.
It was.
I had to grew another inch, but no big deal.
I could just feel my whole body just all curling into itself of how much I hate this. Okay, no, next year. So we're looking at some stuff for next year. Guys, we're open to ideas. Please kick us some suggestions over at Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. Yep. We're active on that page. and the Facebook page in general. You can private message the Facebook page as well. We'd love to see that. I think one of the things is there's some talk about putting together a real life budget build. We don't have all the final details yet.
We've had very good successes with budget build episodes in the past, but we've never executed an actual budget build.
I'm not sure if people love us arguing and that's why they like the budget build episodes, or if they like the ideas that are shared about building a budget build, and we have on guys who have some sort of idea of what they're doing. We mock build or put together a plan for a budget build, if you will. So I don't know what elements of those shows that people like, right?
Have we ever thought about maybe doing a poll on our podcast page about what trucks guys drive to know what that popularity is?
It's a good idea.
Dang, man, I just thought of it, It's something.
Look at that. And planning at its finest. So we're looking for suggestions. We're looking for feedback. We're talking about a budget build, potentially doing one in real life. Kind of what would that look like? What would the number be and how would it work? So we're working on some logistics. UCC, we'll be at UCC again. I don't know if dates have come out for that. I think they have. I'm pretty sure it's June again. Yeah.
But don't quote me on that.
Right. It's probably still the first weekend in June. So we'll look to see what that is. Get you guys exact dates as we go forward. We've covered UCC in so many different ways over the years. Now that we've been doing UCC for as long as we have for the podcast, I'm always interested to hear feedback again on what do you guys want out of UCC? Do you want to hear interviews with the other vendors who are there? Do you want to hear the live short recordings, bite-sized episodes of us running around and getting guys while they're in the staging lanes, getting ready to race and getting ready to dyno and getting ready to sled pull? Those are always an absolute fucking nightmare the older I get to go and produce. But if people want them, we'll do it.
I was even thinking maybe we do like a questionnaire, and we roll out like 4 episodes where it terrible on producer Justin's part, but we do like 3 or 4 episodes, and we do have to interview every one of these guys, and we ask them one question, and that episode is that question that each individual answers.
Oh,
that'd be wild.
Oof. Yeah, that sounds plausible. I could probably put that into like an actual production plan to get that done. So look at this. Look at the amount of planning we're putting into our end of year. We're going to do more of this next year, but probably off mic. We'll probably do more of the planning.
Justin's eyes are bulging out of his head like, what are you doing?
We're committing to nothing. Don't worry, Justin. We're committing to nothing. We're just saying these are ideas that we have, and some of them are good, and some of them will probably get scratched.
But honestly, from our listeners' perspective, if there are things that you read and you see and you hear about that are going on in the industry, and you want to learn and know more about that, shoot us a message. Post on our Facebook channel. Like, we would love to listen to what recommendations you guys have for us to offer good quality content for you guys.
That's right. Yeah. Who else do you want us to interview? We have really good luck with being able to reach out to companies and individuals who are known throughout the industry. We've been very blessed to the fact that a lot of those guys are willing to talk to us. So please, who do you want to hear from? Let us know. It's on you now. We've given you our ideas. Where are yours?
Less work, the better. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, guys. From all of us here at Diesel Performance Podcast and Calibrated Power Duramax Tuner, thank you so much for listening to the show throughout the year. It really does mean the world to us that we're able to do this for you guys. It's certainly a privilege to be a part of the podcast and be a part of the Diesel Performance community. For today, I'm Paul Wilson.
And I'm Chris Ehmke.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us today, guys. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Ehmke.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You're up. You're up.
It's up.
I'm up.